embarrassing. It was probably the most embarrassing committee meeting I've ever seen in my life. It's almost like they were Mark Meadows was trying to punch the clock in some way to say, yes, I did have a meeting on the Clinton Foundation, 2 days before he loses the being head of the oversight committee. And it was probably the worst, the worst committee meeting I've ever seen before. Tom Fitton did an okay job reading an overview. Basically, he just read an overview, a 2-year-old overview of this book right here, Clinton Cash. You could have just easily have given everybody one of these graphic novels and been done with it. All the information was at least 2 years old, and there was no star witnesses. That's the key. When you go to the Congress, when you go up there, you drop bombs. You give explosive information that's going to make headlines. That's what you do. That's your strategy. And of course, we had people saying that's what was going to happen. We had Sean Hannity saying that was what was going to happen. We had Sarah Carter saying that's what was going to happen. We had John Solomon saying that there was going to be bombshells. We had Q saying, D5 and D13 and all this, bombshells, explosions, fireworks, all these things that were supposed to happen. And none of it happened. It wasn't even a firecracker. It was more like it was more like some kid in the back of the room doing a raspberry. It was a complete and total disaster. Like I said, Tom Fitton had a tough job. He just had 5 minutes to basically give a 5-minute summation of Clinton Cash. And like I said, you could have bought everyone on the committee a graphic novel. And you would have gotten just as far, probably farther, because it's probably be more entertaining. So I want to say how I would have done it differently. And first thing I would have done is said, first thing, if I was Huber in charge of the investigation, the DOJ guy supposedly in charge of the investigation for over a year, I would have showed up. I think, actually showing up is really a big part of a presentation. If you don't, in the old days, we didn't show up for a sales presentation. We didn't say, hey, could you just have the projectionist, the audiovisual person, go ahead and do the presentation for me? No, you either are there or you're out. Now, there are all these people on the web making apologies for Huber, saying, oh, he was delving into a sex cult building somewhere, and that's why he wasn't there, right? So, yeah, and there's a story out in Great Wave Pundit saying he was sent in information 3 times and he lost it 3 times. I said he was one of the Evan McMuffin folks, I don't want to say FLDS Mormon Mafia, but I will say he is a part of that kind of that NSA group out there in Bluffton, Idaho, in Bluffdale, Utah, which is very much a company Snowden worked for, which name's all of a sudden escaping me this morning. And it was a cover-up from day one. Why is a Utah prosecutor handling something out of Arkansas, and he's completely out of the Washington, D.C. mix and so forth? Now, I'd like to say how I would have done it. I would have first of all showed up. I'd say, hello, my name's George Webb. To maximize the committee, I would like to immediately go to, assuming you are familiar with previous allegations, I'd like to introduce to you Mark Lambert, who was at the center of the Uranium One controversy. For those of you who are not familiar with this is a Russian spy being brought here in the United States, paying $20 million in bribes to a transportation company to falsify invoices about our most precious resource in national security material, which is uranium. Go, Mark. Boom. Mark Lambert. Do you remember Mr. Condrey? Yes, he was the CEO. Do you remember him receiving $20 million? Yes, we actually do. There was a lawsuit to that, an indictment to that effect. He was indicted. He was found guilty. Oh, okay. Do you know a guy named Mikarin? Yes, he was actually indicted. He also went to jail. He's currently in prison right now. Did he give $20 million? Yes, he did. Did you falsify invoices? Yes, we did. Was the name on there 10X? Yes, it was. Was 10X controlled by Teneo in the Clinton Foundation? Yes, it was. Thank you, Mr. Lambert. We appreciate your time here today. In 5 seconds, or let's say 1 minute, you could have immediately established Mark Lambert as the whistleblower, right? For the whole country to see. First of all, you would have figured out who Huber was. You'd have seen his face. And then you would have immediately established Mark Lambert as the key whistleblower. Again, they can't say that they weren't aware that Mark Lambert was the key guy because he was indicted almost a year ago now. And again, we went and visited him about 2 months before, right? The next thing I would say is, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have reason to believe that there was pay to play that was used in affecting these illegal uranium trades around the world. We believe it was done with secure Blackberries. We believe those secure Blackberries were run out of the House of Representatives in a shared Dropbox named 123. We'd like to present our second whistleblower. Here's Andre Taggart. Now, bring in the Marine. Did Imran Awan work for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, head of the DNC? Yes. Did he have the password for Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Yes. Did we find government-marked secure Blackberries at the home as well as Pried hard drives? Yes. Were there also hard drives and different equipment found in a government building, in a house building, with her password and her laptop after he'd been banned from the congressional network, after there had been 20 burglaries? Yes. Okay. Next witness. May I bring to the stand the CAO Kiko? Were you the House Chief Administrative Officer during the time the Awans were there? Yes, I was. Well, did you remember that the Awans had a scandal where there was 5,111 illegal logins? Yes, I do, actually. Was there a scandal in the credit union with Abid Awan, his brother, in sending payments to Pakistan to potentially a paramilitary organization? Yes, there was. Was there a purchase of land in Faisalabad? Yes, there was. Now, whether this stuff directly connects to the Clinton Foundation or not, it enters it into evidence. Now, I believe it all was directly connected, right? We've had, Michael Cohen entering information and stuff from 15 years ago. We've had Paul Manafort entering stuff 15 years ago that has nothing to do with Trump. Why wouldn't Trump's DOJ guy come out there and put out things that just seem to be like smoking guns? Throw all this on the table for that example. I would have another backpack on the table where I'd make sure there was hard drives in it so that it would dent the table as I dropped it on the table, and I would thunk it on the table. I would bring in Lambert. I would bring in Taggart and so forth. And now there's all these faces and there's all these bags falling and dropping everywhere. And you go, I didn't know anything about any of this. When did any of this come into the news? What's going on? Right? The natural human reaction of anybody watching that's going to, what the hell is going on? I never heard about there being a Russian spy and a guy named Mikran. I never heard him saying anything about sending cake to Piketon. I never heard anything about Worthington Cylinder and we're going to, ship cake into Piketon, Ohio. I never heard anything about that. This could possibly be connected with the rodents. We don't know, right? But I would bring my whistleblower in and talk about the industrial operation in Piketon. I would bring in some of the people that died in Piketon saying, hey, we were the ones who just got left cleaning these things, right? So if you're going to talk about Uranium One, bring the actual people that were involved in Uranium One. Again, I went to Piketon over a year and a half ago. I found 2 whistleblowers in Piketon, right? One for the drug operation that knew, well, there's 3 whistleblowers. One that knew about the drug operation. He also knew about the R&L trucking, illegal cigarettes. And he also, there was other whistleblowers that were actually at the Piketon plant where the centrifuges actually went missing, right? That's the real story with Bob Levison. All you have to do is put the faces out there. What did we get instead? We got a University of Pittsburgh professor, right, who was tooting his own horn about working at the IRS and didn't really have anything to add. Then there was 2 other guys that came in a little bit later with summations that didn't seem to have anything to offer in terms of firsthand evidence. So it was the worst staged, managed thing that you could possibly have. If you wanted to bring in an analyst to show pictures and graphs and slides, which is the worst thing you can possibly do, right? The best thing you can do is bring in the incubator girl, right? And then she cries about the babies being thrown in the street. That's the way you do these congressional hearings, right? You don't bring in a slides and charts guy. But if you were going to bring in a slides and charts guy, box office poison, the worst thing you would ever do in a congressional hearing, you would bring in a Charles Littell. You would have Charles Ortel come up there. He's the expert. He's by far and away the expert. Nobody doubts that. Bring in the expert. Why didn't they bring in Charles Ortel? Then finally, they have the folks at MDA Analytics, LLC, I believe is related to MDA Informatics, which is basically a third party, yet another Fusion GPS here in Virginia. So it was a fix from the beginning. Huber didn't show. They didn't have any whistleblowers. They didn't even have William Campbell. Worst case, bring in William Campbell to talk, right? I would have at least had the faces so people in the United States could at least see the faces of Uranium One, right? At least do a 5-minute introduction of the whistleblowers, right? Where they could read their statement. I was there when the $20 million changed hands. I was there when the false invoices occurred. Because right now, everybody thinks Uranium One is a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. There's been indictments, okay? And the people have been found guilty. So it's not a conspiracy theory. But as long as you don't present it, it may as well be a conspiracy theory. If you mishandle things as bad and as poorly as they were handled yesterday, it'll always be a conspiracy theory, right? So that's the key. That's the key there. So I wanted to, why not Ortel? Ortel would have been, if you wanted a dry hearing and somebody who could come in and fill in the blanks and say, there's never been a charity fraud like this before, blah, blah, blah. I've worked with them all. That would have been good testimony to have at the end, but not a lot of slides. But I definitely think the people who needed to be there were the whistleblowers, and their face needs to be put out there. The same strategy we used with getting Taggart's face out, even though it took 200 days or 100 days, where I had to hammer on it for 100 days in a row. But finally, when people saw Taggart's face, that became the face of the Awans. That became the proof that illegal government marking equipment was sent to the home after the Awans had moved out and was being stored in the home of a U.S. Marine, right? Congressionally marked or classified markings on the Blackberries as well as the Pried hard drives. So there was also some kind of evidence of destruction of evidence as well. So I would have plopped it right down on the table, right with Taggart. Again, I don't know how people can do so poorly unless they're trying to do poorly. It's the only way I can't. Like, how could Huber not be there after all this buildup? Oh, wait till Huber comes. Oh, Mike Flynn's giving information to Huber. He's going to spill it all. You're going to get the comeuppance when Mike Flynn gets there. And what was going on with Hannity and Solomon and Sarah Carter building all this up and talking about explosive testimony? It was an F performance, and you just can't go below F. It should be F minus if there was an F minus, right? So anyway, I don't want to go too heavy on that, but that's it. That's it. That's the last time you're going to have a chance. The chance has been blown, so there's no more chance to come back. Again, if you call and subpoena Mark Lambert, and I know Mark Lambert's up in Frederick, I was there yesterday, right? He has no choice. You could ask him yes, no questions. Were you the CEO of Transport Logistics? Do you remember a guy named Darren Condrey? Do you remember that Darren Condrey took bribes from Valerie Mickerin? Do you remember Valerie Mickerin? Do you remember him delivering false invoices to U.S. enrichment? Do you remember 10X doing that? You were making false invoices on the behalf of the Russian government to falsify deliveries to a U.S. corporation in charge of our most strategic weapons resource. Is that right? Yeah, that's actually right. It's not a conspiracy theory, right? I would have a slab of highly enriched uranium at one of those little ingots, and I would slam it down on the desk and go, this is the most strategic resource. This is the stuff of nuclear weapons, okay? And I'd put it down there for everybody to see. So for presentation and planning and for across the board, it's F's across the board. And I only wish I could have done this. I could have done it a year and a half ago. And here's where I'll transition now into the Flynn thing. And supposedly we're going to get a little bit more Flynn information about one of the 19 meetings. We're not going to know where. Hopefully we'll find out where in the 19 meetings that Flynn had this meeting fell with Andy McCabe. But as I mentioned yesterday in front of the DC district, The DIA has worked with, in domestic terrorism cases, as well as overseas terrorism cases, they have done what's called find and fix. They have used their different resources to go around finding different cell phones in certain areas, and so that you don't need to get you don't need to open a finding, is what they call it at the FBI. You don't need to do any paperwork for FISA. You can fly over with a drone, or you can fly over with you can walk by with people with stingrays, little backpack stingrays and so forth, and collect information. Then you can do a lookup on that information and see if it's people from a different country or not. Now, it's supposed to be masked. The information is supposed to be masked if it's an American that's picked up in the sweep. But let's say you're, there's a big event, 4th of July event, and you're afraid that there may be a bomb there and so forth. You're allowed to send DIA people, and this would have been Mike Flynn on Task Force Orange or Task Force National Capital District, NDC, Joint Interagency Task Force. You're allowed to send people through, again, DIA, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, as a part of that. You're allowed to send people through the crowd with backpacks, collecting all the cell phones. That goes back real time. Whoa, got hit with something. Got hit with something there. That goes back real time to the war board, at Defense Threat Reduction Agency over in Fort Belvoir. And they're going, okay, American, any of these people on the watch list, and then those are, light up that board. And then who's from a foreign country? Okay, where are they from? Bring up their dossier, etc. This is all real time. This is all done at Fort Belvoir, real time, right? The people who do that are DIA. That's what DIA does. They do threats. That's, if they had one word description for what they do, it's threats. That's why they work with FBI. FBI then has the street that they say, hey, that guy, there's a guy we blamed for identifying 3 whistleblowers in Piketon for our illegal uranium trade. Let's go follow him and try to pin something on him. Okay. So yeah, it's the tall guy. Remember, he was the one who was going to blow the whistle on the whistleblower at the Piketon where they stole all the centrifuges and sent them to Iran. Follow that guy. Maybe we can blame something on him. So the FBI then dispatches resources. And so I'm using a little bit of a facetious example, but I'm trying to say here is the FBI works very closely with Stanley McChrystal and Mike Flynn. And I'm not just saying works with DIA. I know the FBI worked with Stanley McChrystal, and I know the FBI worked with Stanley McChrystal and Mike Flynn, right? Just by the fact Robin Gritz got a commendation for Mike Flynn and commendation from Stanley McChrystal, right? And she worked for the FBI. I've had several conversations and speeches where Stanley McChrystal talks about working with the FBI. So this is not supposition. And specifically those people. Now, how long have they worked together? How long has Mike Flynn and Stanley McChrystal worked with the FBI? I'm going to say it goes all the way back to Benghazi. Why? Because I sat in on the Benghazi trial and it was all FBI guys. It was all FBI guys. Some DSS, some diplomatic security services people, but there was FBI all over the place, right? I had no idea it was such an FBI operation in Benghazi. Same thing is true for Libya. Why would that be true? Why would that be true? Because it allows Hillary, with her contacts going all the way back to Peter Strzok and the original Secret Service that was in the White House that she culled and developed the first 3 years in the West Wing. She took this little cadre and then got them all into the FBI. She took all these Secret Service guys and then she created a backdoor into the FBI. How do I know that? We have a case where Peter Strzok in 1995 enters as a 23-year-old into the FBI, and he's sitting there doing polygraphs for people coming into the FBI. How could that be? How could a 24-year-old be doing that if there wasn't presidential support, if there wasn't White House support for that? You don't know. I mean, there was 12 people in the lawsuit where they sued him, where they sued the FBI. But you go to the front desk, right? That's a $15 an hour job. I send you over to room A, which is where Peter Strzok is. There's a 24-year-old sitting there with the polygraph administrator. You start answering questions. They say, have you ever used drugs? Well, depends on what you mean. Have you ever smoked marijuana? Well, yeah. Okay. Now we can get rid of you if we don't want you later on. Or if you lie, now I can get rid of you for lying. So they asked a lot of those types of questions. And nobody wants to actually read the lawsuits. These aren't things that are hidden. These are not hidden. They used Peter Strzok as a control point to bring in people and new recruits that would be Hillary's people inside the FBI. That's why later on, 10 years later on, and you're going to find all through Bosnia as well as Kosovo, she was able to bring these people in internationally, and the FBI greatly expanded their scope from the United States when Mueller is kind of in the wings in 98, when they do PDD 62. PDD 62, Presidential Decision 62, in May of 1998, said this FBI and CIA shall work together for disruption for terrorist events, both internationally and nationally. That allowed me to take military resources and combine them with the FBI to do what I was talking about earlier, which is threat reduction in the United States, and vice versa. I could use FBI resources overseas, including FIFA, like we've talked about with the red card, with the international soccer investigations. I could start doing all the same things I did in New York, right? Taking down different executives, offering kind of poison pills on Wall Street. I could do that same thing now in Europe, right? I could gain a foothold in NATO, start compromising people in NATO with FBI. And that's exactly what happened, isn't it? 2001, they recreate Andrew McCabe and Bruce Orr recreate the same kind of crime unit they had. And Mike Gaeta, again, the same guy from the same crime unit in New York in 2000, starting in 2001, all the way through 2009, sets up the same crime unit in 2009 in Rome. Who knows if the crime unit in Athens, Greece is Papadopoulos's yet, the 2014. We don't know that to be true yet, but I believe that to be true. We'll see if it's true or not. But that's how all these people keep coming back into the Trump show. It's all originated all the way back then to PDD 62, which is, hey, the FBI and DIA shall work together. Now, what would be interesting is in these assessments of these different political candidates that have come along, how far back does it go with Mike Flynn? Do the 19 meetings go back to evaluating Trump in 2011 after he had the